Desk, America's News Now.
It's a very sad situation for our country. We shouldn't have this. This is for third world countries, and very unfair.
Donald Trump takes a stand for the first time of maybe many times less than a year before Election Day 2024. Attacks on American bases and soldiers continues to increase as the Mideast war approaches the 1-month mark. And a fun food item becomes a danger as a new recall impacts children across the country. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Right now, former President Donald Trump is headed back to South Florida. This after the embattled presidential candidate took the stand in the $250 million fraud case against the Trump Organization. After wrapping up his testimony, Trump said there is no case against him, disagreeing with how Attorney General Letitia James described today's session.
I sort of do have to be here because I want to be here because it's a scam. And this is a case that should have never been brought, and it's a case that now should be dismissed. Everybody saw what happened today.
Mr. Trump has repeatedly and consistently misrepresented and inflated the value of his assets.
While on the stand, Trump railed against Attorney General Letitia James and the presiding judge Arthur Engoron, while the judge admonished Trump for not answering questions and trying to make the case a political rally. Donald Trump's lawyer called out the judge during their lunch break, setting up grounds for a future appeal.
I'm not here to hear what he has to say. That was what rang true, loud, and could not have been more honest, coming from the judge who has already predetermined that my client committed fraud before we even walked into this courtroom.
The state continues their case on Wednesday as Ivanka Trump is scheduled to take the stand. Meantime, abroad, an increased threat to U.S. interests. More than twice as many U.S. service members may have been injured in recent attacks in Iraq and Syria than the Pentagon previously disclosed, according to what U.S. defense officials told NBC News today. The number of Americans that have reportedly been hurt with minor injuries or were hurt as a result of potential traumatic brain injuries now increasing to 45 after attacks mainly by one-way drones, mortars, or rockets from groups with links to Iran. Just this weekend, a spike in violence against U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, 10 attempted attacks since this past Thursday, bringing the total attempted attacks in the region since October 17th to 38, at least 19 of which have been launched since the retaliatory strikes happened on 2 Iranian-linked targets in Syria last month. The numbers coming a day after pro-Palestinian crowds tried to storm an airbase housing U.S. troops in Turkey just ahead of Secretary Blinken's visit there. Right now, criticism of both the U.S. and Israel surging in various countries around the world. This as the death toll in Gaza has surpassed 10,000, according to its health ministry run by Hamas, in bloodshed that began when the militant group attacked Israel on October 7th, killing 1,400 people. Calls by the U.S. for a humanitarian pause or temporary ceasefire so far rejected by Israel, which has stood firm that it will continue the bombardment should there be no return of the over 200 hostages being held captive there. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who today wrapped up his Mideast tour, showed support to Israel to continue its military efforts, though he reiterated a need to loosen the grip at the border to get more aid to Palestinians.
We're working, as I said, very aggressively on getting more humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and we have very concrete ways of doing that. And I think you'll see in the days ahead that assistance can expand in significant ways so that more gets into people who need it and gets to the people who need it.
His remarks come as the Rafah border crossing with Egypt has reopened to allow for the wounded and foreign nationals to leave Gaza. 99 wounded Palestinians are now in Egypt. Meantime, 300 Americans and their family members have reportedly left Gaza, with at least 100 more Americans and their family members still trying to get out. Meantime, in Tacoma, Washington, hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters marched and blocked a shipment into the port there today. It is believed that ship was set to be loaded with weapons and military equipment bound for Israel. The National Desk's Lee Stahl was there and spoke with some of the protesters.
Our cameras were rolling at 8 a.m., the time protest organizers told us they expected to see cargo trucks heading for a boat at Terminal 7. We only saw several container trucks turn at the blockade.
One of the reasons is my grandmother is Palestinian and I'm from Jordan. And I want Palestine to have peace.
Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters circled the terminal entrance early this morning. The groups say they want to block a boat from loading up with weapons they say are bound for Israel. The ship docked in Oakland, California on Friday and was met with a much smaller protest.
The goal here is to delay, or if we can, stop any sort of arms shipments from the United States to Israel.
We reached out to the Coast Guard, the Port of Tacoma, and the Department of Defense. The DoD sent us an email saying, due to operational security, DoD does not provide transit or movement details or any information regarding the cargo embarked on vessels of this kind. We asked protesters about the conflict and if there is now any hope for a two-state solution.
I think a two-state solution is not a bad thing, but I'm not there. I'm not dealing every day with what they deal with.
At the Port of Tacoma, I'm Lee Stoll for the National Desk.
And Robert Crimo Jr., the father of accused Chicago mass shooter Robert Crimo III, pleaded guilty today to 7 misdemeanors related to how his son obtained a gun license. Per his agreement, he will spend 60 days behind bars and then have a 2-year probation sentence. Also in the plea deal, Crimo Jr. admits that he was aware that his son was a substantial risk to others when he signed his firearm owner's identification card. Crimo III is charged with the murder of 7 people and injuring 48 others in Highland Park just outside of Chicago. His trial date will be set at a hearing in December. Meantime, 3 pages of the manifesto allegedly belonging to the Nashville school shooter Audrey Hale were leaked online today. Among the handwritten pages is a hope to have a high death count and that the victims are not ready, quote, for what's coming. The writer used foul language and assailed white privileged children. Despite pledging to do so, the Nashville police have never published the manifesto. It is unclear at this point if it is fully authentic, but it is believed to be the case. Cincinnati police are still searching for a suspect in the mass shooting that killed an 11-year-old boy on Friday. 5 other people, 4 of them children, also shot in this drive-by shooting. All victims except one have been released from the hospital. 1 victim now remains in stable condition. The victim's father pleading for the public to come forward with any information.
Like, how many people have to bury their kids, their babies, their loved ones?
Meanwhile, we are learning the number of children who went to the emergency room for gun-related injuries doubled during the height of the pandemic. New research from the journal Pediatrics found before March of 2020, there were about 18 firearm-related ER visits every 30 days. But after that, that number jumped to about 36. The analysis is based on data from 9 urban hospitals. The state trial against the 5 police officers charged in the fatal beating of Tyree Nichols is scheduled for next August. Desmond Mills Jr. pleaded guilty to federal charges last week, and prosecutors said his agreement meant he would plead guilty to state charges as well. The other 4 officers have all pleaded not guilty. A separate federal trial is set to begin in May. The nation's busiest rail line is getting more than $16 billion for improvements. Today, President Biden announced new funding for the Northeast Corridor and met with Amtrak employees in Delaware. Much of the work, spread over 25 projects, will include repairing and replacing bridges and tunnels. The White House says the investments will also create jobs. In 1 year, America heads to the ballot box to elect a new president, and new polls are spelling some trouble for President Joe Biden. He's losing support from key Democratic blocs, and he's trailing former President Donald Trump in several swing states. Our Janae Bowens explains.
Less than a year away from Election Day 2024, and President Joe Biden has a lot of work ahead of him to secure a second term.
He just looks weak, and I'm not talking about physically.
Harsh criticism from comedian and media personality Charlemagne the God highlights Biden's waning support from key Democratic voting blocs. An ABC Ipsos poll shows Biden's favorability with blacks is low at 49%, and even lower with Hispanics at 33%. Support from younger voters is lagging too. A Quinnipiac poll shows independent presidential candidate 69-year-old Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has more support from voters ages 18 to 34. He's got 38%. 80-year-old Biden has 32%.
If you're that young, he just seems like someone from a different era.
When it comes to the potential matchup between Biden and former President Donald Trump, new numbers from the New York Times and Siena College shows President Biden falls behind Trump in 5 of the 6 battleground states. Voters say the economy and Biden's age are 2 huge factors.
A lot of concern about the age issue, and that is something that I think he needs to ponder.
Former Obama advisor David Axelrod suggesting Biden needs to carefully think about whether he should continue to seek re-election.
Just do a check and say, is this the right thing to do?
However, Trump's legal troubles could be Biden's saving grace. That same poll shows roughly 6% of voters across those 5 swing states would switch from Trump to Biden if Trump is convicted.
Trump has been very skillful at kind of belittling the attempts to get him, whether it's on impeachment or convictions or January 6th hearings.
Now, Amira, another political expert tells me it's still too early to read much into these poll numbers. Anything can happen between now and next November. But the consistently negative poll results for Biden should have his campaign worried.
Yeah, absolutely concerning developments here. How is the Biden campaign really handling all of this?
So I spoke with a Biden campaign spokesperson, and he told me it's too early for these types of polls. He also points to the fact that former President Barack Obama had similar approval ratings when he was running for re-election. However, David Axelrod, who you just heard from, says one of the big differences is age. Obama was 50 and Biden is 80 years old. Amira.
All right, Janae Bowen's live in D.C. for us. Thank you. And coming up, the holiday shopping season has already started. How much Americans are forecast to spend this year? Plus, where you can find the best deals. Then, a father frustrated by a lack of safe smartphone options for kids created his own solution. We're going to tell you about the phone he designed. Plus, concerns are growing as new research sheds light on toxic exposures and cancer in service members. We're back in just 90 seconds. Customers at multiple major U.S. banks continue to experience delays to direct deposits following a glitch that began on Friday. Down detector showed an increase in problems for Bank of America customers and also identified Wells Fargo and U.S. banks as having big delays today. The Federal Reserve indicated on Friday the ongoing problem was not related to a cybersecurity issue. Well, you're already seeing the holiday displays all over different department stores. The shopping season is underway, and it feels like it just starts earlier and earlier with each passing year. What kind of impact does that have on the season as a whole? The National Desk's Lee Stoll reports from Washington State on how much people plan to spend this year.
It's the season for spending. Holiday sales are expected to hit a new high, close to $1 trillion.
NRF is forecasting that total holiday sales during the months of November and December could reach as high as $967 billion.
The holiday shopping season seems to start earlier and earlier every year. Well, now there's a reason.
They want more time to find deals, and they want more time to really spread out that shopping.
According to Deloitte, 66% of shoppers will try to find deals during the Black Friday Cyber Monday week, relying on promotions to offset inflation.
We tend to find the most deals and the best deals all concentrated around that one big weekend.
According to the Chamber of Commerce, Washington shoppers were 11th for the highest holiday spending in 2021. Gift cards are still a top choice, along with beauty and self-care products.
Shoppers are finding influencers and social media to be increasingly important when it comes to hearing about deals, but also discovering new products and things that they didn't know they needed.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will host the Chinese vice premier for talks on Thursday and Friday as the U.S. tries to calm tensions with the country. Yellen is expected to bring up climate issues, national security, and fair economic practices. President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to meet next week during a summit in San Francisco starting Saturday. Sensitive information on U.S. military members is for sale online, according to a new study by Duke University researchers. It found that personal data of thousands of active duty personnel, like addresses and medical info, can be bought for as little as 12 cents. Senator Ron Wyden called the findings, quote, a sobering wake-up call for policymakers. Meantime, Tyson Foods is recalling about 30,000 pounds of chicken nuggets after reports of metal fragments in the patties. If you bought 29-ounce dinosaur-shaped fun nuggets with a best buy date of September 2nd, 2024, and the number P7211 on the back, you should throw those out immediately or take them back to the store. The USDA says there's been one minor injury from the nuggets, and there could be more. Two more companies recalling, meantime, cinnamon applesauce pouches because of possible lead contamination. Schnucks brand and Weiss brand pouches now being recalled following that Wanabana brand recall. The FDA says there have been 7 cases of possible lead exposure in 5 different states. The agency says young children and toddlers especially should get a blood test if they may have eaten those snacks. And 3 brands of pet food are now being recalled because of salmonella concerns. Mid-America Pet Food, TFP Nutrition, and Blue Ridge Beef all being recalled under certain brands of dog food. And you can find more information on those on the FDA's website. We have reporters all across the country in your specific neighborhoods covering the issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
I hope there's another one like this. There should be more.
If Proposition 14 passes, people like the Girls and Girl Scout Troop 78784 that we caught up with at McKinney Falls State Park may get their wish of wanting to see more state parks in Texas. The proposition would give the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department up to $1 billion in funding for more parkland.
There's not a lot of parks that are within driving distance for many people in Texas that are in urban areas. So certainly finding more parkland and available space for people that are close to those urban centers is increasingly extremely important.
The Texas Coalition for State Parks is really pushing for Prop 14 to pass. They say through the pandemic, we saw just how important state parks are to people as an outlet. And in fact, the group says up to 10 million people visited state parks during that time.
Lots of emotion. An Ohio woman just got married in the hospital where she's being treated for cancer. She was diagnosed with acute T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma recently after noticing some bruises had gotten worse. She and her now husband say they knew it was time to get married. They tied the knot in the hospital chapel in front of 20 guests.
As a parent, you have to feel like you have to have an IT degree in order to keep your kids safe online.
A Texas father has designed a smartphone solution to keep kids safe online and help prevent digital addiction. It's called Pinwheel, and its operating system can be installed on many existing phone manufacturers. It doesn't have a web browser or social media, but offers over 1,000 curated apps. It also gives parents full control of their kids' phones via their own phones. Sounds pretty interesting. All right, up next, Veterans Day coming up, and many people are calling for transparency. We're going to be looking at the link between military chemical exposure and cancer. Stay with us. Growing concerns about toxic exposures among those who have served. A groundbreaking new government study found a link between forever chemicals known as PFAS and testicular cancer among service members. National investigative correspondent Chris Daniels reports.
26-year-old active duty white male who was in his usual excellent state of health until October of '97.
Roger Hill's medical records chronicled the autumn that changed his life. He was serving in the U.S. Air Force as a firefighter deployed to Saudi Arabia when pain sent him to the doctor. He was told at just 26 years old he had testicular cancer.
When I first heard it, I was like, I didn't even know testicular cancer existed. You know, I was healthy. I never smoked in my life. There was no history in my family.
The Virginia resident had surgery to remove the testicular tumor and 2 rounds of chemotherapy. But the ordeal was a mystery, he says, until recently.
And memories started to come back, and I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, they started to kind of come together in my brain like, yeah, this could have caused it.
Hill remembers working with AFFF, or aqueous film-forming foam, used to douse fires involving jet fuel. It is commonly used in military firefighter training. That foam is now known to contain a set of toxic so-called forever chemicals known as PFAS, which have been linked to reproductive issues, developmental delays in children, and multiple types of cancer.
Use a lot of foam. You were kind of told, you know, it's like soap. I had remembered that our gear was soaking wet.
From the foam?
From the foam.
A groundbreaking federal study, the latest examination of PFAS exposure and testicular cancer to date, looked at the banked blood of Air Force service members. It found those employed in fire protection had elevated concentration of PFOS, a PFAS chemical, in their blood. Higher blood levels of PFAS were linked to testicular cancer. How strong is this research tying PFAS exposure to testicular cancer?
It's increasingly strong, Chris, and it's at least more likely than not to be a cause of testicular cancer based on both population studies and experimental studies.
Dr. Alan Ducotman participated in the design of one of the biggest studies to date examining the impact of PFAS chemicals. When you look at the data from this latest study, do you think it should lead to new warnings for service members?
I think that it is very reasonable at this point to say that PFAS is a suspect or a more likely than not carcinogen.
Spotlight on America First exclusively reported unclassified documents reveal the military knew about the health risks of PFAS in firefighting foam as far back as a decade ago. But just now, starting last month, the DoD will be required by Congress to stop buying AFFF and stop using it by October of next year. What do service members deserve that have been potentially exposed here?
They deserve a clearer health communications. Here is the current science about increased risk.
Despite growing evidence of the risks of PFAS, Roger Hill told Spotlight on America there are many who may not even be aware, especially in the military community. What do you think the military and the VA owes service members when it comes to PFAS?
I'll take an apology or, hey, sorry that we took so long to do this stuff, and admit that what they did was, wrong. Not really an emergency to them or important to them, not knowing how much it affected, people and, of course, their families.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Chris Daniels.
Well, take a look at this stunning video here. Italian divers discovering a trove of ancient bronze coins underwater that date back to the first half of the 4th century, between 324 and 340 AD, possibly pointing to the presence of a shipwreck. Officials estimate finding between 30 and 50,000 coins, and here's what they look like, all cleaned up. Amazing, pristine condition. So many questions about how it got there and remained all these years, but certainly a real life treasure. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. I'm Amira David. Thanks so much for watching.